What I want to discuss now is some of the code that Dreamweaver automatically generates for you and what it means. There's going to be little editing you really need to do at this point, but it's more just to give you a basic of an understanding of why there's this code there and what it's doing for you. So I'm going to go to File, New, and going from left to right, I'm going to pick blank page. The page type is going to be HTML, layout none, and the doc type should be HTML 4.01 strict. Now it shows up as the default for me because that's how I set it up in my preferences. If you have not set it up this way, just make sure that your doc type is 4.01 strict. Now, what happens here is that you see we have some code, namely this DOCTYPE declaration over here, 4.01, which is what, and if you look at strict DTD, it's kind of giving you all the clues that it's the strict 4.01. And we also have this other meta tag over here that says something about a character set of UTF-8. These two things I want to explain now, as well as a missing element over here, which is the language element. So first, let's talk about doctype. We know, before we even discuss doctype, we know that HTML is a structural language, if you will. Basically, it's just defining the structure of the page. It's telling you what the headers are, what the paragraphs are, and basic elements. It's not supposed to be there for style. So when you use this doc type declaration, you're kind of going to use the strict idea is really saying that this is strictly a constructural semantic document. The transitional ones that you may have seen, let's see, these other ones, these HTML transitional, this kind of allows for some presentational tags in the HTML. At one time, there were tags like center and I think U for underline. Actually, I have it loaded up in my browser over here. What they had these other like depreciated elements that were, for example, here you go, bold and center and font. HTML transitional actually allows you to have these tags, but strict does not. Now, that doesn't mean you can't center things or underline things or any of that stuff. It's just what it's saying is you can't do that inside of the HTML. You need to do it with style sheets, and that's exactly what you want. Now, if you're just working with older pages and the transitional is already set, for whatever reason, that may be necessary. But if you're starting fresh, from here on end, use the strict. And don't use XHTML either. XHTML was something, it's kind of a hybrid of, I don't want to say hybrid, it's HTML with a little bit of an XML tang to it or flavoring to it, which may not mean anything. But it ends up being just an idea of syntax. Your HTML syntax may not be correct, or it allows a different style of syntax and very subtle things. Without getting too involved in this, the idea is that HTML 4.01 strict is what you should be using if you're creating new pages from here on in. So, and if we go back, you see that in the doc type declaration, there's some sort of URL over here to a file. And if we go, it's worth our while to check out that file, at least giving you an idea of what that is. I mean, this file is basically the link for this doc type to say, well, these are the rules of HTML 4.01 strict. Honestly, in your day-to-day web designer life, you're not going to be working too heavily with these concepts, but it's important that you have a general idea of what they're going to do. This is actually taking a little bit longer than I wanted to. Oh, here we go. We could download it, and I thought maybe it was kind of going too slow. And here is that actual file. and it says HTML 4.01 strict, which excludes the presentation attributes and elements that the W3C expects to phase out as support for style sheets matures. And this draft was made in 1999. And if you look down here, there's just a bunch of code, and it's not going to mean much to you, but this code is what the browser is using to define what 4.01 strict actually means. So, moral of the story, use 4.01 strict. Don't mess around with this code. Leave it in there. Simple as that. Now, the next thing that we'll talk about real quick is this character set. And you see that it put this character set. Well, what does this actually mean? Character set is like a really fundamental computer science thing where it says what characters are available, what characters actually, specifically in this case, what characters that the browser should expect in the HTML code. And if you look into what UTF-8 actually is, if you just go to the Wikipedia page, you could read about it, but if you look down, you see what all of the different what they might be, the different characters may be down there. And you may say to yourself, well, these characters are sort of limiting. I mean, for example, you have, what if you want one of those, what is it, European or German U's, the two dots at the top of it, or the Spanish characters with the tildes and all that kind of thing. You could still have those in HTML. Those actually just require special presentational codes to make them happen. All this is saying is, what characters can I expect in the HTML code, not what's being rendered on the page, because what's being rendered on the page we could do all sorts of magic with that. But this is just saying to the computer hosting the file, these are the characters that I have in here. This is how you should deal with them. That's it. Moral of the story, don't mess with this. This is important information. It makes consistency in case most servers are going to be configured properly, but if they're not, which is out of your hands as the web designer, these declarations over here are just telling it what it should expect. And finally, what we're missing is the idea of a language. Let me go to my web page that I have here on language. Now, what we don't have is we haven't defined a language for our HTML element right here. And if I go to HTML, I'm just going to start typing. You see, even it's getting set up. I have LANG that I could select, and now has two quotes. I'm going to put EN for English. Now, what this is, what happens when I define the language is that now the browser, there's some relevance, not so much to your design, but how your page could be, well, for one, indexed. Google would use this to put you in English search results. Now, Google's algorithm's smart enough to kind of read your content anyway and realize it's English and put you in the appropriate search results. But this is just another way for other engines which may not be so savvy to know. The other thing is, for screen readers, it's good to define a language because it knows how to. If you're not blind, you haven't used the screen, you may have not used the screen reader or ever been exposed to it, but it could do certain things like the rhythm at which it tells when it goes from text to speech, it could change the rhythm, it could change the tone. As far as grammar and spelling goes, that could be checked. There are a couple of different reasons that you want to define a language tag, and if you refer to the W3C's page on why you want to do that, it'll give you, actually, and I have another link here too, why it's important. It'll give you a bunch of different reasons, from speech synthesizers and Braille translators to, in some cases, it can be used by user agents or browsers to load different fonts based on languages defined in the language attribute. So, if nothing else, it's just good practice. And when you follow good practice, good things happen. So, it's not a big deal to enter it. So, enter it up.